Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the second day of the California Transportation Commission hearing for January 21st, 2016. I would like to begin with a roll call. There he is.
Mr. Alvarado.
Yeah.
Mr. Simmons.
Here.
Mr. Burke.
Here.
Mr. Hart.
Here.
Mr. Galletti. Here. Mr. Martinez.
Present.
Commissioner Inman.
Here.
Commissioner Keough.
Here.
Mr. Manafra.
Here.
Mr. Talvani. Chair Dutt.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you very much. We are going to begin with items that carried over from yesterday. Item number 18, approval of the revised 2016 STIP fund estimate, assumptions for the price-based excise tax rate. Laurel Jansen, Stephen Keck, welcome. Where's your orange tie, my dear?
My tie is orange and blue this morning.
Excellent. Caltrans or OCTA colors.
Oh, there you go. Unintentional. Unintentional. So good morning, Chair and Commissioners. We did spend a bit of time last night going back through different price-based tax scenarios at the request of the Commissioners. And I'm going to run through those today, and hopefully we'll find one that matches what we want to do. Doug is now handing out a one-pager that includes all the scenarios I'm going to talk about today, as well as a hard copy of the presentation that I'm going to have on the screen here in a second. So, as that's being passed around, do you know this thing is not working? There it goes. I want to remind the Commission of a few points, namely that we are only updating a single assumption, and that is the price-based excise tax rate for the fund estimate period. Because we're not and haven't altered any other assumptions, we were able to go back and create scenarios for the one assumption change last night. I would say that much more complex changes would not have been possible. And I want to acknowledge, while I'm talking about that, the hard work of Garrett Franklin, the staff manager who's responsible for the fund estimate, who put in the time last night to create this for you.
Well, thank him very much for us.
I want to also mention that the loss in revenue, when we're talking about this price-based excise tax, is directly related to the decrease in STIP target capacity. And I want to remind the Commissioners and everyone else that what we're talking about today is only for the non-PTA capacity in the STIP. The PTA capacity would remain unchanged at $200 million over the fund estimate period. So I wanted to hit this slide again. I kind of really breezed past it yesterday. This is a history of the price-based excise tax since its inception in 2010. It started out at 17.3 cents, increased up to eventually 21.5 cents in 13-14, 18 cents in 14-15. 12 cents in the current year, and of course we're projecting 10 cents in the budget year. I want to make the point that the 10-cent scenario includes adjustments for overcollection in prior years. Because the Board of Equalization is required to set this rate and then look at it again every year and say, was the rate that we set correct? Did we collect more or less revenue than we would have if it was a sales tax? And then they have to make an adjustment to the next year's rate to account for that. That 10 cents that we're projecting for next year includes an adjustment for overcollection. We don't know exactly how much yet because the Board of Equalization has not released their numbers, but it does include that. So as we move forward with an adoption of some rates for the fund estimate period, I'd like you to keep that in mind, that 10 cents is most likely not sustainable for that period of time. Also would like to point out that the Board of Equalization will be adopting a rate next month, and they may change their methodology to include either a multi-year look scenario or other things that could change what they're going to publish. We don't know yet. I just wanted to put that out there again. So this is a revised look at the assumptions we went through yesterday. I didn't animate this one the same way, but we did add to each of the scenarios the impact to the fund estimate. So, for example, the orange line, the dotted line, our favorite color, and the recommended scenario is the $800 million decrease to the STIP. The purple line, based on EIA projections, is about $850 million, and the lowest projection, which adjusts the existing tax rates down to start at 10 cents, is an impact of $1.27 billion to the STIP. So last night, and these are shown on the same scale as the previous slide for reference. The blank space at the top is not something I would generally show, but I wanted to keep them on the same scale so you can see how they compare. We have a 10-cent scenario across all years, which eliminates about $2 billion in STIP funding. We did an 11-cent scenario that eliminates about $1.8 billion in STIP funding. A 12-cent scenario that's about $1.5 billion. And then we did one that steps up 1 cent per year gradually to 14 cents, which eliminates $1.4 billion to the STIP. So, Commissioners, your one-page handout that came attached to, well, not attached so much, but loose leaf separate from the presentation, includes all of these scenarios and the impact in each year. And it's important to note that under a scenario such as the 10-cent scenario, we are actually projecting a decrease of more than $2 billion, which essentially eliminates all capacity in the STIP for the 5-year period. As it happens, I have given away all of my presentations, and I don't actually have that sheet anymore. Under the 10-cent scenario, we would be looking at 4 years of zero capacity in the STIP. And in the 5th year, we are estimating capacity of just $136 million. I would also be recommending, based on that revenue assumption, that we cease all allocations to STIP projects in the current year, as we would no longer be able to afford the cash flow for those projects. So in any of these new scenarios that we're looking at today, which generate fairly significant cuts to the STIP capacity, we would be looking at several 0 years in the STIP. Even under the brightest of these 4 scenarios, which is the 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 scenario, we were looking at total STIP capacity of just $750 million over 5 years. That's a cut of $1.4 billion from the currently adopted 2014 STIP, and that has 2 years of zero in the very beginning, and that's on the very bottom of the first page. So I've included on this one pager all of the, I think this up to 9 scenarios now that we've put together, so that you can compare the relative size of the cuts and make a decision either to choose one of these or any other one. I'll note that figuring out the change to the revenue based on any scenario is relatively easy for us to do. Figuring out the cash flow implications and how that translates into the program values, which program target we might put in each year, is a little more complicated. I can't do that instantly. But if you choose a scenario other than ones we've presented, we know what the impact will be over the 5 years, but not in each individual year, and we can follow up with that. I think for the purposes of what we're talking about today, having a simple 5-year capacity would suffice. So with that, I'll open this up for general discussion and questions.
I have a question.
Mr. Medaffer first, then Mr. Arp, and then Commissioner Burke.
Thank you very much, and thanks to the staff for doing the extra work last night. And again, as I said yesterday, I think this just really demonstrates how antiquated and unsustainable the current system is that we have to fund transportation in the state of California. And I'm glad to see the legislature and the governor are looking at making changes to this. Let's hope that somehow this becomes a wake-up call to actually doing that. You know, the 10 cents, I just can't support, because at 4 years, you get 4 years of zero capacity, and then you said you only have $136 million in the 5th year. Is that correct?
Yes, $136 million.
So a couple of questions. If we go along with the recommended projection, which is the dashed orange line, correct?
Yes.
Don't we have the option of reviewing this number in this situation again next year at the same time?
Yeah.
In 2 years? But that's what I'm going to get to. Can we get status reports?
Absolutely. So the fund estimate itself is adopted in August of each odd-numbered year. We generally talk about the assumptions that go into that around March, April, May of an odd-numbered year. So just about a year from now, we would be talking about the assumptions for the following fund estimate. Also, if there's a change in law, such as the governor's proposal or another proposal, all three of the big proposals out there fix this.
That's what I thought.
There's slightly different methods that fix it, but it fixes this.
Okay.
So I would be more than happy to bring an off-cycle fund estimate to the commission that would show a change in law.
So, Madam
Absolutely.
Chair, that would be one thing, whatever action we end up taking, I'd want to have that incorporated in a motion. And then I guess another question, Stephen, is how, if, for example, the 10-cent option, which is 4 years of zero capacity, how would that affect some RTPs around the state of California?
So I would have to probably defer to the commissioner to programming for that. That's a little outside my area of expertise.
Laura?
Well, essentially, you'd have to basically delete everything that's programmed in 16, 17, and later. And all of these projects, of course, are consistent with their regional plans. And so the regions would have to then go back and I think they would have to look at whether or not they can still meet their goals, those who have SCSs. It could be a big impact. No matter what you have to delete, they may have to look at that.
Okay. I'm just very concerned to do anything that's too draconian that's going to the RTP situation is already tenuous in some of the regions. I don't think we should do anything to exacerbate it. Just for the purposes of discussion, I'm just going to place a motion now that we adopt the staff recommended projection with the request that staff keep the commission and the commission staff keep the commission updated as this continues. Obviously, I realize the legislative process that's in motion. Hopefully, the governor and the legislature will be able to come to terms on some sort of a financing package that fixes this. But clearly, if there's ever a time to sound the red alert on transportation financing in the state of California, this demonstrates it. Thank you.
We have a motion. Do we have a second at this point? Okay, we're going to hold that. Thank you. Next is Commissioner Art.
Two questions. One is probably fairly simple. The other one is a little more disturbing to me. If you go back to the chart you gave us yesterday, and this is the simple question, by the way, I'm just defining that. What's curious to me is that most of these projections show a big spike up early on and then a leveling off, which seems counterintuitive to me, considering what we all see happening with the world price of oil, and that and OPEC's strategy basically to just drive the price down and get a lot of competitors out of business and then probably jack it up. So it seems to me that the opposite would be happening in a lot of projections, that we would see a low price for the next few years and then probably an increase. But I'm not an expert. I was just wondering if anyone has asked that question.
So that's a very valid question, and that is at the center of this entire discussion. 12 cents is what we're recommending in our orange dotted line scenario. 12 cents is equivalent to $2.60 gas, right around $2.60. That's less than we have right now today. Okay, it's not much less, but it's less than our average today. The reason the 10 cents is as low as it is because it's adjusting for overcollection in a prior year. So when we're talking about 12 cents, we're saying, if there's no adjustments up or down for overcollection, we think 12 cents is reasonable based on this is 17, 18, so we're looking, 18 months ahead of time. It's the average price for that next year could be around $2.60.
Okay, thank you. So now the other question is, and I was talking to one of your district folks yesterday, and he brought this up, and it was something that was an eye-opener to me. How many, under your estimate on the orange line, are there projects in each of the districts that are relying on STIP funding that really are there to take care of air quality control requirements, and how many of those are impacted by anything that we do, and where does that? I mean, what happens to the rest of everybody's plans to do other projects if they fall out of compliance?
Very fortunately for me, that's a question outside my area of expertise. I would again have to defer to either programming or
Yeah,
commission.
again, this is something that the regions are going to have to tell us as to, which projects are getting to the goals that they're trying to meet. And when if we have to delete, they need to tell us which are the priority projects that we should not delete because of that. I mean, I don't know that we're going to be able to save the projects that have the most meaning, but we'll do what we can.
Commissioners, I don't think there's any way, particularly if we adopt one of the more negative projections. Yeah. I can't get my mic to turn on. Somebody wisely shut it off. I'm just telling the commissioners that I don't think there's any way that with one of the more negative projections that we could avoid substantial amendments to the regional transportation plans, because they would have to be adjusted intuitively. They would have to be adjusted, if nothing else, to change the timing of projects. The FTIPs, the Federal Transportation Improvement Programs, would have to be adjusted because they are highly based on timing. So there would definitely have to be some significant adjustments, in my view, to the regional transportation plans.
Which I think was Commissioner Medaffer's point in looking. I mean, it's not just the transportation system; it's all the greenhouse gas reduction strategies that every one of us are trying to implement locally. Are you completed, Mr. Art? Very good.
Excuse me, commissioners. I don't believe your microphones are working.
Oh,
From here, it sounds like they're not working.
microphones aren't working at all. So
Yeah. Hello.
There you go.
okay.
Just from what you said, I have assumed that it's about 2 cents. But what I'm really interested in figuring out is there an average over a period of, say, 10 years or 5 years that we can look at to not go to doom and gloom?
So this is the entire history of the price-based excise tax, since its inception in 2010. The governor's proposal, for example, says, hey, we want to take the average of the last 5 years and make that the new tax rate. And the governor's proposal is at 18 cents per gallon. I think both Assemblyman Frazier and Senator Bell's proposals start the fix at 17.3 cents, which is the same number that we started with in 2010. So on average, we've been at around 18 cents per gallon since its inception until this year, where we dropped down to 12 cents. So I don't think it's possible for me to say now how much they've overcollected last year that they're adjusting for, but I think 2 cents is a good guess. We'll know a lot more when the Board of Equalization releases their detailed report, hopefully in February. But
By the time we meet in March, we'll have a little bit better information in terms of what they're calculating.
So that is certainly true. Unfortunately, the law only allows you to amend the fund estimate until March 1. And March 1. And you can choose to do what you need to do, but the law says March 1 is the deadline for amendments to the fund estimate.
My inclination, I'm only one vote.
Yes.
But my inclination would be to not go to the 10 cents and to not go to the doom and gloom. And certainly, if we find that, that the board has not made some of the decisions that we think or hope they'll make, then we can always adjust our project. So that would be my approach.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner. I just want staff to know that I've gotten a text from someone watching us online
and they can't hear the commissioners speak. So if we could adjust that. Okay.
No, it's even worse.
By the way, those shirts are being sold for $10 a piece to shore up state transportation.
Hashtag make a deal. Okay. All right, bringing us back to order. Stephen, you're back on the hot seat. Thank you very much.
Not a problem.
Next up, I think it was Commissioner Gilmetti. Gilmetti is next, and then Assemi. Sorry.
Well, I think we've got to be realistic. I mean, it's nice to think that these things are going to go straight up. I'm not in favor, nor would I vote for the staff recommendation. I think the chart that was presented to us today, showing a penny increase over the next several years, is something probably that's more realistic. The line goes up a little bit slower, but it continues to go up. There's going to be a glut of oil on the market probably for the next year or two. So, if anything, I think the excise tax is probably going to go below 10% to start with. But I don't want to be that pessimistic. So, I think our charge here is to be as realistic as possible and not pessimistic. And the reason I wanted the 10-cent flat line is just to see where the bottom might be. And so, when everyone has a chance to discuss this, my recommendation is going to be the 1 cent increase per year.
Which is the purple line on this chart above us. Yes.
Right, that Stephen gave
Great,
us today.
very good. Thank you, Commissioner Gilmetti. Commissioner Assemi.
A question, Stephen. Is that the 10 cents that's on there below this year's projections?
So it is below the rate that is set for this current fiscal year, which is 12 cents per gallon. And again, it's an estimate of what we think the board might do next month. It is it's 2 cents less than it is this year.
And what happens to all the regional, all the RTPs if the number stays at 10? I mean, we need to be realistic. And I also believe that we're going to have a glut of oil in the market with Iran coming on and Iraq and China slowing down and Europe kind of heading into a recession. So what happens if the numbers stay at 10 cents?
So again, the impact to RTPs, I'll defer to other folks more knowledgeable than I, but the 10-cent scenario essentially eliminates any STIP at all. So, you end up with $136 million in the very last year, the fifth year. And really, I would be recommending that we halt all allocations in the current year as well, because we would no longer have cash flow to support even the projects we have going.
What happens to all the planning that's done? I guess that's part of my question.
Commissioners, so the projects that are programmed in the regional transportation plans, the projects that had STIP funding that, will need to be deprogrammed, those projects will not go forward. It will mean that where there's multiple funding with the federal funds, the FTIP will also be impacted. There will be work on Caltrans side to reprogram. Look at the FTIP. I think there would be impacts. There's air quality conformity issues with respect to this. There's a lot of issues for the regions. And we also have to remember the rural counties, this may be the only sources of funding that they have. So those projects will also, the options are very limited for them.
And they know that this funding is in jeopardy right now, correct?
They do. Laurel has met with the regions. They're here in the room. They're very much aware. So there may be regions that want to speak to this, but it's a real big issue, and it's going to have a lot of implications.
And in fact, Sarkis Kachek would like time to comment. If Stephen, you can give him
I yield the mic.
Yield the mic, but don't go away. Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioners.
Yeah.
Sarkis Kachek with the Santa Barbara County Association of Governments and the Regional Agencies Moderator. So yes, this is a huge impact to us. This is, we met yesterday, we've been talking about this for a few months. The big thing is that we have not just STIP money tied to this, we have that are going to projects that are helping us meet state goals, regional goals and priorities, helping with air quality. We are dealing with our RTPs, which are subject to SB 375. We also have billions of dollars statewide tied to the STIP. We have to realize that the STIP is not the only fund source, but we do have matching funds that are attached to these projects that are programmed in the STIP that we've been working on for years and years and years. So I realize that we're in a very precarious predicament right now with the state of the price-based excise tax, but you do have to realize that we have projects that will have to go back to our boards, which will need to be deleted, which will then cause a cascade effect throughout the board. So it's not just the STIP, but it's other matching funds, it's air quality conformity, it's the FTIP. So it's, I mean, I'm trying to speak globally. There may be others that want to come up and talk about the impact, but we have billions of dollars of projects that are tied collectively here. So that's just one perspective we wanted to provide.
Yeah, thank you, Sarkis, because I was shocked that we don't have more people standing up to speak. Kenneth Cow from MTC. Oh, I'm sorry. But before you speak, Sarkis, don't go yet. Commissioner Arp has a question for you.
And so do I.
Great.
Go ahead, Jim. So the question I have is, what would be your recommendation? I mean, how do you think we ought to approach this?
Okay. So I'm not an expert like Stephen. My recommendation is that one thing that we talked about is that we know where the price-based excise tax is right now. Maybe just to go with an approach where we look at something that doesn't require a full-scale deprogramming or deletion of projects, and then come back next year when we do the 2018 fund estimate. If there's a fix, either through the governor's proposal or through the other proposals out there that help remedy the price-based excise tax, that'll allow us to have a better idea of going forward into future years. So maybe just going something that doesn't have a huge impact for the long term.
I understand that is a good, hopeful, problem-solving kind of approach. What we are faced with is that unless there is some real injection of new funding, it really doesn't matter what you do or we do with this projection. We all, and part of the problem is, and maybe I'm sounding like a broken record, but unless those at local government finally wake up and realize they're going to lose their projects, we are going to lose our projects. And so, when does that happen? At what point do people finally say, you know what, this is not acceptable. We can't function. Things are going to go away, and that's what we're facing right now.
Commissioner Semi and then Commissioner Alvarado.
And Sarkis, thank you for that recommendation. And that's my point exactly. I think the message needs to be that the funding, is in extreme jeopardy. The RTPs need to know, the counties need to know that we are, a lot of these projects could get deprogrammed. The message needs to be out there that, we don't have a very rosy picture. We don't have a crystal ball, but we also don't have a very rosy picture of in terms of STIP revenue in the coming years. And that message needs to be out there. So hopefully we can get to more revenue in one form or another in this year.
And Commissioner, that was one thing I mentioned yesterday under my report was that once a letter comes out from the Commission regarding the state of the STIP fund estimate, that's when we're going to be working on our individual letters to our legislators that are going to highlight our specific projects and the impacts that they're going to have in our regions when it comes to deleted projects. So we're going to try to do the heavy lifting.
Thank you.
We just want to wait before the Commission, or wait till after the Commission.
Oh, we'll give you some stuff to use.
Okay.
Thank you very much. And Commissioner Alvarado.
I guess my question is both for Sarkis and staff. Okay, say we pass the orange line and money doesn't come in. The trasportation plans still have to be, at what point do they still have to be redone? Nothing changes, right? If we're not programming projects to meet those state mandated goals,
right,
something still has to happen, right? When will that happen?
I would have to defer to the regions on when they need to update their RTPs, but they certainly won't be meeting all the goals that they've set out.
In the time frames that they're required to deliver.
Right.
Correct. Sarkis, do you have anything to add on that?
I don't know if Susan want to respond. I can respond too.
You're the expert, but even with the orange line, it's my understanding, projects will be deleted, and the regions will need to update their plans accordingly and make amendments to the FTIP if there is federal funding. They'll need to look at the air quality conformity again. So even with the orange line, there are implications. Sarkis, is that correct?
Sure. Yeah. So with the orange line, there are implications where we're just going to have to go back and look at what our absolute highest priorities are and how those projects help us deliver our RTPs and our goals. If we go any further, then we're just talking about full-scale deletion, and that just will create even further RTP updates, which I'm not the RTP person from agency, but I can tell you that anytime you delete a project, you're going to have to go back and see how you're meeting the goals again. So,
Commissioner Inman and then Commissioner Burke.
Well, I think it's clear to all of us we have a crisis, and I think all of us feel between a rock and a hard place. So I'm not sure. But the uncertainty of all of this costs precious transportation dollars, in my opinion, that aren't going to work, because we have spent thousands of hours in all of these plans, and we're in the middle of this in the SCAG region right now. And those are all based on achieving a bunch of mutual goals. And so it's to me, I don't know what the answer is, but Stephen made a comment that the BOE could decide to change their calculation, and this is so crucial to me, to think that maybe that number could jump by, the blue line to the orange line just by somebody using a different modeling technique. So I think, what can we all collectively do? Clearly, the alarms have to be sounded. We have fuels in the cap and trade to help us achieve our goals. We have air quality greenhouse gas reduction projects in these RTPs, and my fear is all of the efforts that we've put just aren't, it's going to slow everybody down, and it's not going to improve mobility for anybody. So I guess, where's Stephen go? Is he hiding back there? Can you come on down?
We have a couple more speakers, commissioners. Just wanted to let you know.
Could you just expand a little bit on your comment that the big question mark of BOE could use an averaging, the governor's proposal. There's several proposals that fix this. Could the BOE do it on their own?
My comment regarding the BOE is that there has been some discussion that they might be able to do a 5-year smoothing average instead of the 1 year that they do now.
Okay.
If they do that, it's up to them to decide whether or not that fits within what the law says. If they choose to go down that path, it could change what their estimated number is for 2016-17. It doesn't change it a whole lot.
So it won't really solve the problem?
No, it's not going to solve the problem by any means. The governor's proposal, as well as the two other major proposals, all set the rate at a fixed level, at 17.3 or 18 cents, depending on the proposal. And I looked that up from Eric's spreadsheet this morning, so I appreciated that as well, the side-by-side. So those all fix it by adding more revenue in than what we otherwise see. A Board of Equalization look at a 5-year smoothing might change that number from 10 cents to 12 cents, or as high as 12 cents.
Okay, so
that's
blue
not much.
to the orange. Okay.
I think that's going to be possible. Well, this is too important.
And I just, in case anybody from Board of Equalization is watching, I'm not putting any words in their mouths. I'm just trying to do my best to estimate what they might do.
Okay. I have Commissioner Burke.
Well, I'm sure all of us will be calling our Board of Equalization members. But just from a local standpoint, we receive this, and we have done planning based upon a certain number of projects. Now, what happens? We can always delay projects, but we cannot start up new projects because there's no money. So what happens is you don't necessarily start up new projects, but if you eliminate all the planning that you've put into old projects or projects that are ready to go, you are in a very difficult position. Now, in Los Angeles, we're proposing a new or extension of Prop R. Now, what's going to happen is if the money is not there, I'm sure that the people who want the projects, and they're dependent upon the projects, a lot of them, they're going to really push for that R to make up any loss that comes about if, in fact, that 10 does not go up to the 14. But if there is still, and we have to go through, as you say, all the EIR and everything else, if you have to just throw that away because you don't have any idea that you'll ever have in the next 5 years sufficient monies to carry out those projects, you have lost all of the time you've invested in planning, going through all of those hearings, and where people testified and said, well, I want the project, I don't want the project, but they really thought that it was going to come about. So that's the reason why I am willing to go with the staff. And now, I'm not an expert on world politics, but it's true, Iran's going to release a lot of oil next couple of weeks. But Iran also is looking forward to a different economy, and they're including in that economy sale of oil prices that are not going to be at the bottom. So I think that it's true. Probably in the next month or next 6 months or even the next year, we may see that 10 cents or that 12 cents stay that way. But for us to do all of our planning based upon the fact that they're going to release all that oil and that the prices are going to go down or stay where they are now, I think is a loss of a lot of time and energy and planning going into projects that can always be delayed. But if you stop them, you have to start over.
Thank you, Commissioner. I have 2 more speakers I want to hit, and then we'll open it up, all right? Kenneth Cow, MTC. Kenneth.
Thank you, Commissioners. I just wanted to weigh in on how MTC is thinking about this. I'm not going to get too much into the scenarios. I think that's a very interesting topic for the commissioners to decide on. If it were me, I would probably bought some Super Powerball tickets and see if we could have won that. That would have fixed everything. But I think for MTC, the RTP issue definitely is a concern, although we are in the process of updating RTP right now. So, whatever the commission adopts here, we would have time to amend our air quality conformity and make sure that the years are correct for that study for the RTP. Our concern with any delay and the STIP issue here is for our FTIP. The Caltrans does require us to deliver our FTIP 2017 new FTIP for adoption in October, and we would not really have enough time to account for any project deletions that would occur as a result of the revised fund estimate. So I was going to speak on item 20, which is the schedule, and I would have recommended that Caltrans examine delaying the submittal and the adoption of the FTIPs, the 2017 FTIPs, to a similar amount of delay that the STIP was going to be delayed. So if we delay the adoption of the STIP from March to May, then I would also recommend a 2-month delay in that FTIP adoption as well. So that was what I was going to mention on item 20, but definitely this is definitely a painful exercise. And I think, whether you choose the orange dotted line or like the blue 10-cent stable, we're going to have to delete projects no matter what. So our level of effort is going to be relatively the same for both of those. And I think, yesterday I think I talked to Will a little bit about, if we were to do 10 cents all the way through, and I was thinking, well, why don't we just, that would be really easy, right? Rather than us picking which child to feed, all the children will be hungry, right? Because we're going to delete all the projects basically in the STIP. But that does bring up the question of, well, how will the legislature react to that? If it's too drastic, they might say, well, you're just overblowing out of proportion. So, there's definitely a lot of things to think about there. So, thank you for that.
Thank you very much. Barbara O'Keefe, Tehama County Transportation Commission.
Good morning, Madam Chairman and Commissioners. Barbara O'Keefe, Tehama County Transportation Commission on behalf of Gary Antone. I'm here representing the starving rural children, and I want to just focus on one single project. It is our last seismic bridge over the Sacramento River, which is an I-5 alternate, and it is one of the only alternates available. We are ready to come in next year and ask for construction funds. The bridge currently costs $46 million. As you all know, the average escalation for 1 year of delay is 4%. Tehama County cannot afford that. The silver lining in this is that this bridge can be built, can go to construction, if you choose to adopt staff's recommendation. The funding sources for this bridge are the seismic bond dollars from Prop 1B, federal highway bridge dollars, and STIP dollars. On behalf of Tehama County and other rurals, I respectfully request the Commission adopt staff recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Barbara, just so that you know, I am happy to come and meet with any of your legislators to talk about this personally and the importance of what's happening today and the impact on your region. So,
and Madam Chair,
I offer that.
You, Chairman.
Madam Chair, I would be delighted to join you for those legislators or any legislators.
And you'll be happy to know that this structure includes bike and pedestrian facilities. As you probably already know, you cannot ride bicycles south of Reading on I-5, so bring your bike, Commissioner Gardino. It's a beautiful seismic, beautiful drive. And now you can go across the 1920 single-lane wood deck structure, and hopefully in a couple years you'll go across a beautiful seismic bridge.
You had me at hello.
Thank you.
Very, very tough decisions to be made. Any other comments? I have Mr. Kempton would like to comment, I know, before we get to discussion here.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to say that the staff will stand by our original recommendation. We think that's a reasonable course of action to take. We spent quite a bit of time with the department in trying to come up with something that made sense. I would just say to the Commission, we need to make sure that whatever projection you adopt, that it is not necessarily based on sending a message, that it is not based on trying to avoid the impacts that are going to fall on the regions as a result of that. The fund estimate by statute is required to be a reasonable estimate of funds available. That's what staff recommended with the dotted orange line. If you choose to make another judgment about what is reasonably expected to be available, that is certainly your purview to do so. But it should be based on a reasonable expectation of the revenues that are going to be available, not on necessarily delivering a message and not on trying to avoid impacts to our stakeholders.
Very good. Questions, comments? Mr. Assemi?
Quick question. What happens to the other funds that are committed as these projects get canceled? The federal funds as an example.
Well, I would think some of those funds, they may just sit, because if they're, if it's like an earmark, it may not be able to be used for something else. I think it would be up to the regions to determine as to whether those funds can be moved to something else. But we do leverage a lot of other monies with the STIP. So,
if I can add on to that, there are certain situations where if a project has spent federal dollars on a pre-construction phase and then that project never reaches a logical conclusion, such as actual construction, there are instances where we have to give those federal funds back to the feds.
I don't have a
That's a payback.
Thank you. Commissioner Arp? Oh, I do now. Go ahead.
I think that what we are trying to do here is figure out the best, most rational course. That is our job. But if we don't communicate what that means adequately once we've made that decision, then we're idiots collectively. And we are in the second stage 2 or 3 of cancer, rapidly getting worse. There is a cure. And the cure resides right now, the quickest cure resides with a legislature that, if they got engaged and would really seriously consider the options that are available, we could cure this. There are legislators in your districts who are skating on this because they just don't want to deal with it. If we took the most the leanest of those, which is the governor's, bless his heart, he is the fiscal, he watches the dollars more than anybody I've ever seen as a governor, and I've been around a long time. His plan is the leanest of them. I probably would go a little higher if I were in charge. But if you took the leanest program, it would at least fix this. It wouldn't fix everything, but it would at least fix this. And you know what the cost of his program is? It's about 25 cents a day per person. Do you realize how ludicrous it is for us to be grappling with these huge problems for 25 cents a day? But we got people hiding behind no tax pledges because they feel that that is really what life is all about. 25 cents a day. It doesn't sound like that could possibly solve the problem, but when you add up every 30 million persons that live in this state and collect it each day, it's not very much per family, and it would save a whole lot of jobs and get this state back on track to where it really needs to be.
Thank you, Mr. Arp. Any other comments? I next have one more speaker, Patricia Chen, LA Metro.
Thank you, Chair Dunn and Commissioners. Good morning. I'm Patricia Chen with LA Metro.
There's no motion.
You have before you a decision to make about how to approach some less than encouraging information regarding price-based excise tax revenues and what they mean for the size of the STIP under current law. It is wise to be realistic and prudent in making financial decisions, and I would just ask that we go with the staff recommendation. I have a couple of reasons for that. One are the things that are making me kind of shake right now, which is the projects that Metro has in the STIP. We have a safety project on the state highway system. We have light rail vehicle project that is already under contract, but it's programmed with multiple allocations in multiple years. So we have $100 million hanging out there yet in allocations, and we have light rail line extensions, 2 of them, the Foothill and the Expo Phase 2 that will be opening over the next year. And without those allocations and timely delivery of the rail cars, I'm very worried about, just jeopardy of those line openings. We also have an AB 3090 for another project, the Crenshaw light rail transit line, that's also under contract. So there's just a lot of concern here about that. I would also appeal to just the sense of an efficient way to go about the process. All the regions have gone through the modeling and evaluation and programming work to bring recommendations ready to go for the Commission to decide upon. That needs to be redone at least one time based on a new fund estimate, which a new fund estimate does need to be done, it looks like. But if we undershoot the revenue amounts, we'll have to go through it a third time to get projects resuscitated. Is that the way we want to conduct this business? I would suggest trying as hard as we can, or as you can, to select a scenario that's realistic. And I think we already have a very painful situation and a painful message going forward to our collective legislators. And I guess, there's medicine is a good thing in terms of the message, but there can be too much of a good thing. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you, Patricia. The issue for us is there's no medicine here. We're talking about a disease that has no solution yet. And so the most important thing you said that resonates with me is that you'll be back talking to your legislators about making a deal, because it's the only thing that would create the medicine to avoid that kind of redo a third time. So thank you for understanding. I am so pumped up with just Commissioner Arp's comments. I think we need to have that viral to every district in the state. So thank you. Commissioner Assemi and then Commissioner Medaffer.
I just have a question before you get off the stand. What happens if staff recommendation numbers are too optimistic? Then what do we do in a year?
I believe that would trigger an allocation plan, which is just in terms of process and paperwork, it's a little bit less than going the other way and getting projects resuscitated and reprogrammed, because programming is a big involved process. An allocation plan, while painful, is less process.
Laurel, did you have anything to add on that one?
Yeah, I was just going to say basically what Patricia said. We would do next year what we're doing this year. We would allocate based on our priorities, and projects not allocated would be placed on a delivered list with the hopes that we would have sufficient funds in the next year to clear that off. We would also, in the next STIP, probably allow delays of current year projects like we're doing now.
What happens with the 1 cent increase, the annual 1 cent increase under that scenario?
Well, it's just a much bigger deletion that we would have to make versus the recommended option.
Additional $600 million.
Yeah, it's additional deletions.
Commissioner
it's more than
Medaffer?
half, I think.
Thank you, Chair Dunn. I was the initial person to speak at the outset of this, and I made a motion for the staff recommendation, didn't get a second. I think the discussion that's taken place since probably demonstrates that the prudent course, while I don't disagree with Commissioner Gilmetti's approach, it sends a message. I also recognize the fact that there's hopefully going to be some changes coming forward over the next several months. So I'm going to once again give an attempt to renew my motion that we adopt staff's recommendation.
We have a motion?
I'll second that motion and call for the question.
We have a motion and a call for the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed?
No.
No.
We have 2 noes. Any abstentions? A no in Commissioner Gilmetti and Commissioner Assemi. The motion carries. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are done with item 18. Are we ready? Item 19. Approval of the amended 2016 STIP fund estimate. Laurel?
Yes, Commissioners, based on the assumption that you just approved, the department has prepared a revised fund estimate, and staff will recommend your approval.
We have a motion by Commissioner Madaffer, a second by Commissioner Assemi. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Any abstentions? Item 19 is approved. Item number 20.
Commissioners, if I may, before I leave the
Absolutely,
podium,
Stephen. Thank you.
I really want to thank everyone for the very robust discussion that we had over the last 2 days. I think it really highlights the problem that we have, and I hope it adds fuel to the fire. There's a lot of work from my staff. They did a great job, but I think the time that we spent on this will pay dividends a lot in the upcoming year. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Stephen. Appreciate your professional review of this. Item number 20, now approval of the 2016 STIP schedule revision. Laurel?
Yes, Commissioners, this is an action item. You have a book there in the package. This, with the adoption of a revised fund estimate, we need to delay adoption of the STIP to give everybody time to do revised proposals and to give us time to review those to develop staff recommendations. The timeline in your book item assumes adoption in May at the May meeting, and there are intervening dates in there for submittal of the RTIPs and for the STIP hearings and staff recommendations, and staff would recommend your approval of that timeline.
Motion by Commissioner Madaffer.
Second.
Second by Mr. Assemi. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Any abstentions? Matter carries. Thank you very much. Now we're moving on to item 52. I'm doing a jump ahead on this item, which is the Hayward Bypass excess land transfer to the City of Hayward. Stephen Mahler, it's an action item.
Yes, Commissioners. This is, as you mentioned, an action item. This item has been very long in coming to the Commission, but it has arrived here. This is the sale of access State Route 238 Hayward Bypass projects to the City of Hayward. We have a signed, sealed, and delivered purchase and sales agreement between the department and the City of Hayward. There's one thing that the staff would request, that in that agreement a slight change be made to clause 1.4 on page 4 and clause 3.1 on page 7, where it says that the Commission approves the purchase and sale agreement. The Commission actually does not approve the purchase and sale agreement. That the wording be changed, that it's upon approval of the purchase and sales agreement between the department and the City of Hayward. Having said that, staff recommends that the Commission approve direct sales of access State Route 238 bypass project properties to the City of Hayward per CTC Resolution G98-22 Clause 2.2, and the fully executed on January 20th, 2016 purchase and sale agreement between the City and the Department.
Commissioner Gilmetti.
Well, I hope this is the end of the trail. We've been at this too long. I want to congratulate both District 4 and the City of Hayward for finally coming to a conclusion. I'm only disappointed that it took as long as it did to get to where we're at, but I'm very happy that it looks like we're at the end of the trail. And I'll make a motion to approve staff recommendation.
Second.
Motion to approve by Commissioner Gilmetti, second by Commissioner Arp. Discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposition? Any abstentions? Thank you very much. Congratulations all. Commissioner Inman.
Just going back to our STIP discussion, we had originally scheduled a hearing on STIP for this afternoon, so I'm assuming that we need to postpone that. Is that
Yes, the schedule you adopted has new dates for the hearings, and we'll do the South hearing at the same time we do our Irvine meeting in March.
Okay.
We'll have our South hearing the afternoon that Thursday, and then the North hearing will be shortly thereafter, I think the 24th.
Okay, I just want to make sure nobody's watching and planning on coming this afternoon. We'll be there.
Very good. And then, Mr. Kempton, you have a comment?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Back to item 52 and the Hayward issue. I want to, first of all, commend Commissioner Gilmetti for his dogged attention to this over literally a decade. He was sort of the fire that kept us moving on this and constantly pushing forward for a resolution. I want to also thank Stephen Maller from our staff who, if you need a bulldog on any matter, he's not only Mr. Sunshine, but he can impersonate a bulldog very, very well. So his role in this was very, very important. But I also want to thank both the district and the city of Hayward, because we pushed hard over the last 2 months in particular to make sure that this item was brought to the commission at the January meeting. This item was originally pulled off by the department. We put it back on. We were in constant touch, told that it was going to have to be moved because they couldn't come to agreement. I know that the department staff and city staff worked over the weekend hard to make sure that they got all of the issues resolved. I see Bijan Sartipi here. I think Fran David is in the audience, the city manager from Hayward. So thank you for putting your staff to the grindstone and getting this agreement done. This is really a very important watershed in terms of a long-standing problem, and it takes care of one of the two very difficult right-of-way issues that the department has had, that being State Route 710 in Pasadena, as well as the Hayward bypass issues in Alameda County. So congratulations to everyone.
Thank you very much. All right, now we're moving on to item 45. I believe Mr. Assemi may have to recuse himself on this one. Adoption of the 2015 Active Transportation Program, Metropolitan Planning Organization, Component 8 of 9 large MPOs. Lori Waters, an action item.
Madam Chair, I need to recuse myself on this item because of my company has a conflict. We own property adjacent to the city of Visalia's trail.
Very good. So we will wait for you to scurry.
Madam Chair, probably wouldn't make any difference. You could bifurcate the issues so that you separate the one project and vote separately on that. Is that not possible, staff?
Yeah, we could do that.
And so if we remove the Tulare project and vote on that separately, Commissioner Assemi could vote on the rest of the package, and then we take this Tulare project separate.
Very good. Lori, I'll have you set us up for this.
Okay. Good morning, Commissioners. The next 3 items on the agenda are related to the Active Transportation Program. The first 2 items, tabs 45 and 46, are to adopt the MPO component of the 2015 ATP. These are action items. As you recall, we adopted the 2015 statewide and small urban and rural components of the ATP at the October meeting. Tab 45 is to adopt the Active Transportation Program for the following agencies: Fresno COG, Kern COG, MTC, SACOG, SANDAG, San Joaquin COG, STAN COG, and
we're taking off
Tulare, the
yes.
whole, okay.
Right, let's do that one.
Okay, so we'll be adopting 7. Okay.
Very good.
The 2015 ATP was the second ATP cycle. It includes 3 years of funding for fiscal years 16-17, 17-18, and 18-19. There's approximately $360 million in programming capacity available for the program, with about $144 million available for the MPO component. Commission staff reviewed all the MPO program submittals for consistency with ATP program guidelines and to ensure that the MPO project recommendations were selected through a competitive process and were consistent with the ATP guidelines. The staff recommendation includes 44 projects, but that is not including the ones in Tulare. ATP This includes over $51 million for 32 projects that benefit disadvantaged communities. The staff recommendations is essentially the same as what the MPOs have recommended. I'd like to thank all the regional agencies for the continued positive working relationship on the ATP. After adoption this afternoon, there may be the need for more technical changes and corrections. As we've done with other programs, the proposed adoption resolution includes a clause that would authorize staff in consultation with Caltrans and local and regional agencies to make further technical changes, with all substantive changes to be brought back to the Commission for approval. Staff recommends your adoption of the MPO component of the 2015 ATP program for the 7 MPOs that I mentioned.
Very good. Any questions or comments? I have a motion by Mr. Alvarado, a second by Mr. Assemi. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposition? Any abstention? Okay, 7 out of 8 are approved. And now Mr. Assemi is leaving the room here. Thank you. Lori?
So this is an action item to adopt the Tulare Active Transportation 2015 Active Transportation Program. Staff recommends your approval.
Thank you. I think we're going to sit here for about a half an hour and a motion by Mr. Gilmetti, a second by Mr. Medaffer to approve Tulare. Discussion, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposition? Any abstentions? Very good. Matter is approved. Can we grab Mr. Assemi back in? I think he went around this way. Oh, he went around the flag. Oh, he did go? Okay. Yay. All right. Item 46, adoption of the 2015 Active Transportation Program. Lori, back on.
Commissioners, tab 46 is the adoption of the MPO component of the 2015 Active Transportation Program for SCAG, and this was given to you as a yellow. SCAG requested adoption of the program as a separate item due to their board's adoption schedule. Staff is recommending to adopt 49 projects requesting ATP funds of approximately $76 million. This includes over $59 million for 41 projects that will benefit disadvantaged communities. One of SCAG's recommended projects, the City of Santa Ana Pedestrian and Bicyclist Count Program, was determined to be ineligible for the ATP. SCAG concurred with this decision, so they have $225,000 of unprogrammed ATP funds. SCAG intends to bring forward another project at the March meeting to program these funds. Staff recommends your approval of this item as presented in the book item.
Commissioners, I have one speaker on this topic, Stephen Patchen from SCAG. Stephen.
Good morning, Commissioners, Madam Chair. Executive Director Kempton is no longer there. Just a few comments on the program. Appreciate staff's summary. My name is Stephen Patchen. I'm a Senior Regional Planner, Active Transportation and Special Programs at the Southern California Association of Governments. On behalf of SCAG, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to provide these comments. I'd also like to thank CTC and Caltrans staff for their great work, along with our county commission staff who came together as a region to provide this project list in front of you. This active transportation program is a key component of our transportation network in Southern California, and it's also a key component to our regional transportation plan sustainable community strategy, which we're updating in 2016. One example of the vitality of this program, in the 2012 RTP, the active transportation funding estimate was $6 billion. As part of the 2016 update, that has increased to almost $13 billion, to $12.9 billion. So this active transportation program is an essential component of meeting those funding goals for the 2016 plan. Just a few items of note, highlights of the program. As Lori mentioned, our program awards approximately $76.2 million to the region, and we will be back in the May commission to provide the amendment to account for the unprogrammed money. As it stands now, 3% of the funds were dedicated to planning. Again, an essential part of this program, we feel, is to dedicate that money to planning to ensure strong projects continue to come to the program. Also, to reiterate staff's mentioning of disadvantaged communities, about 78% of our funding went to disadvantaged communities. And also, another item of note, about 28% of our funding went to Safe Routes to School funding. Following the adoption of the program today, SCAG and staff will continue to work with Caltrans and CTC staff to ensure the success of the program, the deliverability of these projects, partnering with workshops and additional public outreach. And while I'm up here, just a quick mention of Cycle 3, and as folks will, you'll be discussing Cycle 3 guidelines and the timeline. SCAG is in support of exploring amendments to a proposed timeline in Cycle 3. And we look forward to discussing with stakeholders and staff how to align the cycle to accommodate smaller projects, planning projects, so those projects, when adopted, are a little closer to funding years to better align that process. So in closing, again, I'd like to thank everyone involved, commissioners, staff of both CTC and Caltrans, and our county commissions, and we look forward to Cycle 3 and working with all of you again. So thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, we have a matter before you, number 46. Am I looking for a motion? Thank you, Mr. Alvarado. Second by Commissioner Burke. Any more discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposition? Any abstentions? The matter passes. Item 47 now, on information item on the presentation of the draft 2017 Active Transportation Program Guidelines. Lori Waters will present this. I just note we have a number of speakers on this one, Commissioners. Lori?
Commissioners, tab 47 is an information item, and you should have this item as a yellow. We're starting the third cycle of the ATP program. That would be the 2017 ATP, and the first activity in that process is updating the guidelines and the application. And this cycle, as opposed to the first two cycles, we would like to adopt the application along with the guidelines. We're bringing this item forward as an information item just to hear commissioners' thoughts on the guidelines and to hear from stakeholders at the outset of the process. The guidelines and the application are updated in collaboration with the large ATP work group, and that is a broad group of stakeholders. That's regional agencies, state agencies, advocacy organizations, and anyone else who's interested in active transportation. We'll be holding 3 workshops starting at the end of January to discuss the next cycle with all of our stakeholders. This is to get that conversation started. Staff put together a first draft of the guidelines and the application. Those drafts are attached to the book item, and the changes are shown in strike through and bold. Many of the changes that we're proposing are administrative, just to more align the guidelines with how the program is actually functioning in practice. However, there's a few changes that I wanted to highlight today that are more substantial and will be of interest. One is that we are lowering the percent of ATP funds that can be distributed for plans to 2% from 3% in the last cycle. And then the other changes are to the scoring criteria. We are proposing to lower the points available if you're an applicant that is proposing a project to benefit disadvantaged communities. We're proposing to lower that to 5 points from 10 points. And the reason for that is that in the first 2 cycles, particularly the last cycle, the scoring cutoff was so high to be funded, it was 88 points, that if you were located in an area of the state that could not show that you were providing a benefit to disadvantaged communities, you were almost effectively barred from the program. It was very hard to get funded. And we don't think that that's really the intent of the program. So we think with lowering the points to 5, we're still providing an incentive to disadvantaged communities while being able to provide a little bit better balance to the program. For those 5 points that had previously gone to disadvantaged communities, we're proposing to put that under construction readiness. However, in the draft guidelines, they were not presented exactly what our intent. What we mean for those 5 points is to go to projects that were funded for components prior to construction in one cycle of the ATP. Then they come back in a subsequent cycle for construction funds. They would get that 5 points to help them a little bit in the process, because if they, each cycle changes a little bit, if they come in another round and don't get funded, then the ATP funds could effectively be lost. So that's where we're proposing now. And the other thing is we're proposing a method for tiebreakers. We had ties in the last cycle, and so we're proposing to put in the guidelines the process that we used in the last cycle, which is if projects are at the funding line have the same score, we would look first at construction-ready projects, then projects that score the highest on question 1, and then if we still have ties, look at the highest score on question 2. So this is, like I said, this is just a first draft, and we're looking forward to working with stakeholders on these changes and discussing other things that could be done. And so some of the things that I think will come up in the workshops are ways that we can ensure that we're providing a meaningful benefit to disadvantaged communities, how we can make the public health question a more valuable question in the program to help us get to the best projects, and how to score non-infrastructure projects and plans. So with that, I'll take any questions, and I'm sure we have speakers.
Yes, thank you, Lori. Are there any preliminary questions from commissioners? Very good. Speakers, come on up. I'm going to give you.
I just have one now.
Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Burke.
I've already indicated my concern. Could we have some method of evaluating as we go forward to the scoring process, and when we get the project scored, that we get some indication of the impact of some of the changes that are being suggested, particularly when you reduce from 10 to 5 points disadvantaged communities. And then I'm also interested to hear how that impacts the issues in terms of health and obesity that are emphasized in the program.
What I've heard from stakeholders is that what we need to really work on in the program is that we're providing a meaningful benefit and a direct benefit to the disadvantaged communities. So some of the things that we've talked about are trying to get at that in some of the other questions, such as the public health question and through the public participation, where the applicants show how they are going to provide that direct benefit to their disadvantaged communities. So I think there is some work that needs to be done there, and I think we can use our stakeholders' help on that.
Thank you. All right, speakers, come on up. Phoebe Seaton, Erica Whitcomb, Chanel Fletcher, if you wouldn't mind coming up. I'm going to give you a minute each to comment on this information item. As you know, the Commission will not be taking action today. Phoebe Seaton is with the Leadership Council for Justice and Accountability. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. We are not supportive of reducing the points given to disadvantaged communities at the outset. or the move in reducing planning dollars. Again, we're speaking on behalf of primarily rural disadvantaged communities. We see that there's been historic disinvestment or underinvestment in these communities, and this is not just addressing the need, but also remedying past underinvestment. And that goes for both the planning piece as well as the focus on disadvantaged communities. We also think, and other speakers will talk to this more articulately than I, that we need to review the applications in and of themselves to see how points are awarded and make sure we're awarding and focusing those points correctly. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Phoebe. Erica Whitcomb, Policy Link.
Hi, I'm Erica Whitcomb with Policy Link. Just want to really thank the Commission and the staff for all their work and their leadership in this program. And we do want to really, commend the focus and the commitment to investing in disadvantaged communities, given that close to half of the state's population resides in these communities, and that many of these places lack, safe and healthy infrastructure and have faced this sort of disinvestment for decades. We are concerned with the proposal to reduce the weighting for the disadvantaged community scoring criteria, because although we are very happy that many projects are proposing to provide benefits to disadvantaged communities, we do think that there is a lack of a real thorough analysis that can give us more information on if these communities are really receiving the benefits claimed, and if the projects are really designed to solely focus on the transportation needs and challenges of the residents in these communities. And so we do believe that the estimate of how much funding going to these communities could be an overestimation, and that we would ask that we hold off on reducing that weighting until we do have a more thorough analysis and evaluation. And we would also like to emphasize our support for planning assistance and the need for that, given how so many communities across the state do not have access to active transportation planning, and that will really ensure we have better projects in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Erica. Chanel Fletcher, Safe Routes to School National Partnership.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I think I will probably build upon Leadership Council's comments and Policy Link, so I will try to keep my comments short. I really want to thank you guys first and foremost, the commissioners, the CTC staff. I think you guys have all been great stewards of this program and put so much hard work into it, and so I think we are happy to be invested partners and want to continue working with staff and the commissioners. I really want to build upon what Erica said, and I think also what Commissioner Burke mentioned about the impacts of reducing those points, and I think that there's still, to me, it's not very clear what that looks like. I think we're also not very clear on what the analysis is behind the benefits and what we've really seen. And so I do think that before we kind of make a drastic measure of reducing the points and not being clear on what impact that's going to have on these communities, since they're so under-resourced and been underinvested in, we should hold off, do the research, look at the impacts, and then I think for cycle 4, if necessary, consider reducing those points. I also want to bring up, particularly, I think, on the planning piece, as Erica mentioned, we are very, very supportive of getting planning assistance. It's so critical for infrastructure projects. I think having plans in place and being able to map that out. And finally, I think I want to make a nod about the schedules. We are also on the Technical Advisory Committee. It's been a great group to be in. But I think with the kind of the rush of cycle 3, we're feeling a little bit like, it would be good to have a little bit of a delay to be able to really dig into some of these issues and really think through how do we want to work through them, how do we want to recommend to the commissioners how we can do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up, would you please come on up, is Tony Dang, California Walks, Jeannie Ward Waller, California Bicycle Coalition, and then Barbara O'Keefe, Tehama County Transportation Commission. Any of those speakers here? Tony Dang, Jeannie Ward Waller, and Barbara O'Keefe. Yes, I see them. Come on up.
Good morning, Commissioners. Tony Dang with California Walks. First, I just want to thank staff for their hard work in really making the Active Transportation Program a really successful program. I just wanted to touch upon 2 points. First, around the issue of reducing the points to disadvantaged communities. We're really strongly opposed to taking such a drastic measure without having more analysis on the impacts that it will have, just as Commissioner Burke had raised. In my own analysis of several of the awarded projects in the past 2 cycles, there were several projects that were fully credited for the 10 points, even though they weren't located within a disadvantaged communities. And that raises some red flags for me, because the Commission's guidelines say that 5 points are to be for projects that are physically located within it. So these sorts of irregularities really need to be sorted out before we take some measures around the disadvantaged communities issue. Secondly, on planning, I just want to say that we are strongly supportive of continuing investment in planning dollars, particularly for disadvantaged communities. Just for everyone's reference, over 75% of California's cities and counties currently lack any sort of formal pedestrian planning document, and less than 8% of cities and counties have a pedestrian master plan. Of our 10 largest cities, only 5 of them have any sort of formal pedestrian planning document at all. And some of our largest cities, including San Jose, Los Angeles, and Anaheim, lack any sort of formal pedestrian planning. So I strongly urge the Commission to continue the commitment to investing planning in the active transportation program, as well as allowing the regions the flexibility to invest in planning in their communities.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you very much. Next up is Jeannie Ward-Waller. 1 minute, Jeannie.
All right, I'll be quick. Good morning, Commissioners. Jeannie Ward-Waller with the California Bicycle Coalition. I'll say the same thing as my colleagues. Thank you all so much for your investment in this program. I want to especially thank Lori. I know she's been putting in really long hours. You're just adopting the MPO program, and she's already presenting you the guidelines for the next round. So I know she's done a ton of work, and we appreciate working with her a lot. Just to provide a little bit more information on the disadvantaged communities sort of analysis issue. I'm also serving on the advisory committee, and we're digging deep into this issue. And I think, just at first glance, it does look like 88% is a huge number of projects that are benefiting disadvantaged communities, but I want to just acknowledge that some of those only are partially located in or partially benefiting disadvantaged communities. And as my colleague said, some of those are indirect benefits and not necessarily really direct benefits to the disadvantaged low-income people in those communities. So we do need to do some more work on that, and we look forward to discussing through the workshops how we can really tackle that issue for the next round, because it is coming up so fast, and it's a lot of work to go back and look at all those applications that were awarded. So look forward to continuing to discuss it with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, I see Barbara O'Keefe, Patricia Chen, then Kenneth Cow, and then Sarkis Kachek. Barbara.
Thank you, Honorable Chairman Dunn and Commissioners. Barbara O'Keefe, Tehama County Transportation Commission. I strongly support the staff recommendation and would like to give a few specific examples. Very supportive of the decreasing of the percent to plans. Every dollar is precious, and we need to deliver infrastructure and projects. I believe the volume of applications clearly speak to the need that we have and the projects that can be constructed. Good projects are a result of PSR's project scope schedule. And the small community in Tehama County, Corning, they have a bike and ped plan that's just being adopted thanks to Caltrans grants. And so, yes, plans are good, but every dollar is precious, and these projects will get delivered despite of other plans being developed. As far as DACs, congratulations, you far exceeded the threshold as required. A huge success. And even in the small rural community of Tehama County, there's only actually a couple communities very close to where I work in public works that literally qualify for the DAC. So again, this is an active transportation program that has exceeded the thresholds to benefit disadvantaged communities. Strongly support the decreasing in the points, because there's projects that are outstanding projects that have not come forward. And having been an evaluator, when you're going through 35 or 40 of these, knowing that you give people the benefit of the doubt. And so thank you again, very supportive of staff recommendation.
Thank you very much, Barbara. Patricia Chan, 1 minute, please. Come on up.
Commissioners. I just want to say very briefly, the ATP is a great program and very much needed. And I won't go into detail, but echo the concern about making large cuts to the points for disadvantaged communities. I think there's some study needed there. In terms of the planning, in the statewide Cycle 2 competition, 0.6% of the funds went towards planning projects. Based on that, I would recommend not going down to 2%, but going back up to 3%, or at least staying at the 3% and giving those plans another chance. I think there must have been something with the application that it had an anti-plan bias, and I think the sponsors need another chance. I'm particularly concerned about this because there are 15 points in the application for planning. And so when you combine the fact that the disadvantaged community points could be dropping to 5, and there's 15 points for planning, there's sort of a negative 10 points available, or negative 10 points against those projects in disadvantaged communities where they did not have the funds available to do these plans. So
thank you, Patricia.
It's a great concern.
Thank you very much. Kenneth Cow, MTC.
Thank you, Commissioners. MTC did submit a comment letter for ATV Cycle 3. I'll touch on 2 of those points. The first is the schedule. We think that it would be beneficial to allow for some more time for the applicants to think about what projects they have 3-4 years down the road that they may wish to apply for. So I think that would be helpful. And then the second point that I wanted to touch on was on the disadvantaged communities. I do want to commend the Commission for, programming 80-90% of the funds to disadvantaged communities. One thought that we had was, if that's still the way that we want to proceed, then we should be clear about that so that applicants that are not in disadvantaged communities, maybe they don't need to put as much effort, 40, 50 hours of staff time on the application. We have done some analysis on the disadvantaged communities piece, and our analysis showed that if we were to eliminate all of the points in the regional side, all but 2 of our projects would have been funded anyway. So we still would have had a very high percentage of projects that would benefit disadvantaged communities. And not to speak for Sacramento, but I did speak with them, and they actually do not have any points, and they for disadvantaged communities in their regional side, and they still funded, I think, over 80%.
Thank you, Kenneth. Thank you very much. Sarkis Kachek, and then Mara Toomey, Rural Counties Task Force.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm speaking on behalf of the Central Coast Coalition, and I just want to mention that we submitted a letter that's included in your packet. I'll be touching on 2 things. The Central Coast Coalition, which is composed of small urban rural counties, we support the Commission moving forward with having the Cycle 3 program adopted by the statutory deadline of April 2017. In counties like ours, we used to get T funding direct to us, but with the creation of the active transportation program, we must now compete through the statewide and small urban pots for projects in our counties. And we still, even though we've had cycles 1 and 2, we still have a backlog of important projects that need to be funded through Cycle 3. So we would support the Commission moving forward with the Cycle 3 schedule as is. Also in the letter, we'd also support staff's change to the disadvantaged community points, reducing it from 10 to 5 points. We realize that benefiting disadvantaged communities is important, but like prior speakers have mentioned, over 80% of ATP funds from the prior cycles have gone towards projects benefiting disadvantaged communities. So the Commission is meeting and exceeding that goal.
Thank you, Sarkis.
That concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much. And last is Mara Toomey.
Good morning, Commissioners. Mara Toomey, Association of Monterey Bay Area Governments, and I'm in behalf of the Rural Counties Task Force. And I just wanted to say that the Rural Counties Task Force at their meeting last week supports the staff's recommendation in terms of the schedule. We believe sticking with the schedule for Cycle 3 is critical. These funds are critical for rural communities, and particularly given the other funding challenges the state has, to delay the cycle would be burdensome. On the issue of the disadvantaged communities, we have some concerns, but as we look forward to work with staff on that issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maura. Commissioners, I apologize. I'm being called into a meeting with a legislator, and I must leave. I just am going to turn the gavel over to Bobby Alvarado to take up on item 48. As I walk out the door, I cannot leave without saying the work we did here today impacts our climate change goals, our mobility goals, our housing goals. It impacts every industry sector in the state of California. Therefore, it will impact California's economy. It is not lost on me how bizarre that we had almost a dozen speakers on active transportation and not even half that much on what we have just done to the California economy and all the work that will now have to be redone at the local level. Maybe that is foreshadowing of our future, where will all be about active transportation, but that doesn't help ultimately our economy succeed. So I apologize with this rant. I am just hashtagging the planet. Hashtag make a deal is my new byline. I expect the Transportation Commission to issue a press release today to get this one on everybody's radar screen. And again, I apologize for having to leave this in your hands, Bobby, but please excuse my leaving the dais now. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. Okay, item 48. Don?
We have
a question.
We have comments. Yes, just on 47. I just encourage staff to work with. I just encourage staff to work with the folks from disadvantaged communities. There's a lot of issues. I recognize the percentages of dollars allocated is over 80, but they have a lot of issues and concerns. I'm hoping that we can resolve those in the coming weeks and months before this comes back as an action plan in front of the Commission. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions on 47?
Yeah, my mic is on.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Vice Chair Alvarado. And I want to thank all the people who came forward who've been working with our staff on this for the past 2 years. And I really want to commend Laurel and Lori and the other members of our team. I think you're doing a marvelous job with a relatively small amount of money for a very large state. And how do we make this work as best we can? I have always foreshadowed when I disagree with friends why I disagree. And it's only fair that I do that again. The legislation wisely called for at least 25% to go to disadvantaged communities. I thought that showed a lot of wisdom by our legislature to have at least 25%. The way we have weighted this has led to 88% going to disadvantaged communities in a very large state. I don't think any of us would argue that parents love safety for themselves and their kids on bike and ped safety and project improvements throughout our state. When communities that are not in disadvantaged communities who also sorely lack those bike ped facilities and safety improvements are pretty much shut out of this program, that program needs some adjustments. It is not at least 25%. It is 88%. I strongly support staff's recommendation to adjust the weighting to ensure that projects in all communities can have a positive outcome with very limited dollars. Second, planning dollars. Every dollar is precious. These are finite taxpayer dollars. Every dollar for a plan is a dollar not available for an actual project and an actual program. If a community can't afford a plan, which is a relatively small investment, how will that community ever afford the project or the program called for in that plan? We will end up, once again, with lots of plans sitting on shelves and few projects or programs coming from those plans. So this commissioner, making tough decisions as we all have to do, will strongly support staff's recommendation that we honor the legislature's intent and support it on disadvantaged communities, but adjust it so that all communities have a chance for these limited funds. And will continue to support a lower level for plans that may never be realized in a project or a program. Again, it's hard saying no to friends, but these are limited dollars, and that's just one commissioner's view. Thank you.
That's two commissioners' view.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Any other questions or comments?
Just a brief comment. I certainly am very appreciative of Commissioner Gardino's remarks and understand them. I don't think that any of us ever expected 88%. So what I do think that the one thing that I've learned from listening to the comments is that maybe it should be direct impact, not indirect impact, because I suspect that that 88% flows from indirect. So I would be very interested to see how much we have a difference in terms of scoring if it goes from direct impact rather than indirect, because I suspect everyone can find some indirect impact on it. So I certainly don't have any desire to limit access to safety and for bikers and for pedestrians. But I do also want to be cognizant of our state and also the communities that have disproportionately disadvantaged. But I would only say those who have a direct impact, and I'd like to see what that effect is.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to take a 10-minute break, and then when we get back, we're going to go through the rest of the agenda. So that way, we can hopefully be done probably, well, we're going to be done quick. For those of you that have bared with me under my meetings, we like to go quickly.
Okay.
So if you got something to say, say it. If you don't have anything to say, wave. Okay, 10 minutes. We'll be here at 11 o'clock.
11 o'clock, great.
Yeah, we'll be here at 11 o'clock.
Be the drum major.
Yeah. Okay, item 48, Don.
Commissioners, item 48 and 49 are both TCIF action items. Under tab 48, we are adding 3 new projects to the TCIF program: Avenue 66 grade separation, the San Elijo double track project, and the Navy Drive widening. Under tab 49, we are approving the baseline agreement for the San Elijo double track project. Staff recommends approval of both items.
Move approval.
For a second?
Second.
Before we take a vote, I want to note that there are letters from LA Metro, RCTC, SANDAG, and MTC on this item, and they're in yellow in the back.
Those are the support letters for the programming of the 3 new projects. Yes.
Right. Thank you. Any questions? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. That was 49. Item 50, Stephen?
Yes, Commissioners. The next item is a request to directly negotiate an airspace lease extension. The current leaseholder of this airspace lease uses this area for parking, and he wants to develop his office complex next door. The airspace lease is actually landlocked. You can only enter it through his property. He wants to redevelop his piece of the property. His banks told him that he needs a long-term lease before they will give him financing, so he's requesting that you extend the lease term by an additional 20 years. Staff recommends that you approve this lease.
Second. Moved and second. Any questions? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Item 53, Eric?
No, we still have 51.
Oh, 51. I thought it was withdrawn.
51? Not that I know of.
Okay, go ahead. 51. Stephen?
Yes, item 51 is a request to directly negotiate a direct sale to Valley Oaks Park. Oh, it is. Well, then I stand corrected.
And Mr. Sunshine.
Let it be noted that Stephen made an error.
Our little ray of sunshine.
First time in 20 years. Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Yeah, on this, if the item's been withdrawn, I think I know why. It's because the way it's set up was against our resolution G98-22. So hopefully there's some discussions going on. There's another way to handle this. And I'm assuming that the property owner and the applicant are getting together.
Okay. Any other thing? Item 52.
We already did 52.
Item 53.
Thank you, Commissioners, and you were correct. I guess I was next. Who knew? So this item is on the agenda at the request of Transportation Agency. They'd like to present their updates to the Transit and Intercity Rail Capital Program guidelines. These guidelines are not for adoption by the Commission. This is technically it would be an information item unless Commission has some suggestions or comments they'd like to make after the presentation. You can let staff know, and we will communicate those things to the best that we can. And so to do the presentation is Mr. Edison, Chad Edison from Agency.
Thank you very much, Commissioners, and I will try to be brief and then give any time for questions. In large part, the guidelines are similar to what we had last year. They have been updated to reflect SB 9 changes, as well as clarification in lessons learned from the last time around when we did this in 2015. We also received comments from CTC staff that impacted the discussion, the draft guidelines that you see today, and your own Mitch Weiss was heavily involved in the process of creating these when he was at Agency, as well as preparing the discussion draft that we went to workshop on back in November, and then we posted these draft guidelines on December 18th for their 30-day review. We have conducted 2 workshops, one in the north, one in the south, as required by statute, and today I'm updating you on where we are with these guidelines. The funding is probably the headline here, the funding that's anticipated in the coming call for projects. The governor's budget lays out the funding for this program based on 10% of cap and trade auction proceeds, and we estimate that as a baseline we would have $440 million available in the upcoming call for projects based on the continuous appropriation. The administration's transportation funding plan also allocates $400 million a year over a 10-year period to this program. If it were adopted, that would add $800 million to this call for projects that we are going to be doing on February 5th. And there also are approximately $90 million of loan repayments to the public transportation account that the administration's funding plan requests to direct to this program. So we have, going into this upcoming round for call for projects, we have a difference of a $440 million baseline and approximately $1.3 billion available depending on actions that are taken in the coming months. Our anticipated decision date for the incoming applications is by August 1st to have our program of projects recommended at that time. The objectives of the program are very similar to what they were the first time around in statute: to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, expand, improve transit service to increase ridership, do integration statewide of with high-speed rail and the various rail services, and improve transit safety. Eligible applicants continue to be public agencies, including joint powers authorities that operate or have planning responsibility for existing or planned regularly scheduled transit services. Our eligible projects, the fundamental requirement is that each project demonstrates greenhouse gas reductions, and that needs to be well documented in each application. There are a number of projects up here that are included in the statutory description, but are not limited. We're not limited to those projects, and those include rail capital, integration of rail, bus, and ferry, bus rapid transit, and implementation of transit effectiveness studies. Our evaluation criteria really lines up with the program objectives, and in our guidelines this time around, we provide significant additional information on what highly rated projects will achieve in each of these areas and what their project documentation will look like. The secondary criteria line up with a lot of the co-benefits line up with sustainable communities strategies, as well as jobs and housing balance and so forth. And so we have a number of co-benefits that we expect applicants to address, as well as benefits to disadvantaged communities, supplemental funding from non-state sources, the consistency with regional plans, and so forth. Again, these look very similar to what was in the guidelines last year. Our project selection also looks at the risks associated with the project, as well as readiness, project readiness, and then leverage of funds from other sources, especially discretionary funds. And in 2015, we were able to select $224 million worth of projects, 14 projects from around the state, and these have a large number of these. About half of them have come in for allocation before the CTC up to this point, and the others are well on the path to doing that very soon. So much of this funding is getting out the door and into agreements and contracts, and we're excited about how this is moving forward. Senate Bill 9 made a number of changes and clarifications to our program. There was a specific definition of transformative capital improvements focused on reduction of VMT, congestion, and GHG emissions through 3 primary mechanisms: creating a new transit system, increasing the capacity of an existing transit system, or significantly increasing the ridership of a transit system. Senate Bill 9 confirmed throughout the guidelines, throughout the statute, the eligibility of bus and ferry transit projects. It required an approval of a multi-year program of projects, and also expanded eligible projects to include infrastructure access payments to host railroads in lieu of capital investments that would provide equivalent access. The project evaluation approach was detailed in terms of some of the things that we are required to consider, and so that is listed up here. I won't read through the list. In particular, it also directed us by July 1st of 2018 to approve a 5-year program of projects, and then puts us on a cycle similar to the STIP, and that by April 15th of every even-numbered year, we would be doing an additional fund estimate and adopting a new 5-year program that reflects 2 additional years of funding. So by 2018, we will be asked to allocate funds, program funds, all the way through fiscal year 22-23. And that is coming right after this initial round that we're going to do this spring and summer. Also, authority was provided to that grantees could apply to the CTC for a letter of no prejudice that would allow agencies to expend its own money in advance of an allocation. Some of the other changes in the draft, we put in place a optional pre-application meeting with CalSTA, and those are scheduled in February. We announced these in our workshops, and we're going to continue to provide information on this in the call for projects. We provided additional detail on the evaluation process, highlighted some of the funding options for projects that deal with integration, and encouraged coordination with greenhouse gas reduction programs more clearly. Particularly, right now we have a comment period on these guidelines that is closing tomorrow. So we have asked people, and we've also put this out on our web news page, that comments on the guidelines we would like to receive by tomorrow, so that we can be on track to finalizing the guidelines on February 4th, and our call for projects on February 5th. The Air Resources Board has quantification methods related to our program Those are also out for comment. They're asking for comments by January 26th. And then our applications for this coming round will be due on April 5th with an intended list of approved projects on August 1st. We have a number of upcoming meeting opportunities, and these are listed in various Caltrans districts around the state, where in the third week of February we're going to be making ourselves available throughout the state to meet with potential applicants and address issues that would help them clarify and understand both the call for projects and the approach to quantification. And that's the end of this presentation. I welcome any questions.
Any questions? Thank you. Is this an action item?
It's only an action if the commission had comments that you wanted us to share. As this is a comment period and it's ending tomorrow, if we were going to have comments from the commission, we'd have to do them today. So
okay. Looks like we're good then. All right, item 54.
Yes, Commissioners. Item 54 is the Department's quarterly delivery report for the first quarter of this fiscal year. The report continues to be a work in progress, and Jim Davis, the Division Chief of Engineering Management, is here to present the quarterly report.
Good morning, Commissioners. Jim Davis, Caltrans Project Management, reporting on the first quarter project delivery report. One of the things that I added to this presentation was a slide that basically showed the life cycle or project delivery process, and then I will code the performance measures back to those same colors to make it easier to understand. In orange on this particular slide, it shows our planning process, which culminates with a project initiation document that is submitted to the Commission, and then the project is programmed. Once the project is programmed, we begin our capital outlay support process. We perform our preliminary engineering and our environmental studies. We start design and then right-of-way and culminates with construction. At the end of construction, we relieve the contractor of maintenance and turn those activities over to our own maintenance operations organization, and we begin our closeout processes. The next slide shows our performance for the first quarter. For draft environmental documents, we completed 8 out of the 14 planned, or 57%. Our goal is 80%. We are still on track to end the year within our goal. For our project approval environmental documents, we completed 61 out of the 71 that were planned, or 86%, with a goal of 90%. We are still on target for that. Allocated right-of-way funds, we allocated $47 million out of the total annual allocation of $144 million, which is about 33%. The reason there's a not applicable is because it's not a quarterly goal, but it's actually an annual goal in that particular case. Projects certified for this quarter, we certified 44 projects out of the 30 planned, so well ahead of schedule, or 147%. Projects designed and ready for construction. We had 17 planned, and we delivered 17 projects. We actually delivered 16 of the planned 17. We accelerated one, and we delivered one project late. The next line is capital value projects for allocation. You'll see $37 million completed out of a plan of $96 million. That's a big red flag. The one project that was delayed earlier was a very large project that was delivered 2 weeks late. And so we're on track there. And then finally on this slide, projects constructed. We had 28 planned projects to be constructed this year at this quarter, and we delivered 58. So well ahead of schedule, 207%. The next slide, I move over to the financial side, or the closeout side. And on the STIP, we had 13 completed STIP projects that expended $978 million versus a budget of $1 billion, or 98%. Our goal is to be under 100%. And we had 52 SHOP projects that were funded for $376 million, and we expended $332 million, or 88%, and are staying within that goal. The next slide is our watch list, which the Commission asked us to brief you on upcoming or potential risks. In the design schedule, basically for the 15-16 fiscal year, our contract for delivery had 244 projects worth a little over $2 billion to be designed. We have 5 projects that are high to very high risk. One of those projects will not be delivered, and I'll be discussing that briefly here in a moment. And we have 5 projects low to medium risk. On the budget side, for 15-16, we have 696 projects under construction with a construction budget of $8.4 billion. There are a number of projects that have risks. They represent a little less than 3% of our program, and I want to make sure that keep that in mind. There's 3 projects that will be seeking allocation that have a current budget of $6 billion with a potential risk of $1 to $3 million, or $6 million with a risk of $1 to $3 million. We'll be advertising 8 projects with a budget of $49 million with potential risk of $15 to $20 million. 2 of the projects on the supplemental request later today are in this category. In construction, we have 22 projects worth $1.144 billion that have a potential risk of $155 to $175 million. And we have 3 projects on the supplemental vote list later this session. I do want to remind you that we do have 3% of our projects on an annual basis come into the Commission, and that's approximately where we are currently. Not all the projects that I've listed here will come to the Commission for a supplemental vote. We are actively managing those, and many of those projects will not come forward. I do have to take a moment to identify there are 4 very large projects looming that may be coming to the Commission. 2 of them are administered by the Department. One is the Willits Bypass continues to be a project at risk and may be coming forward. The second project, which will be coming forward in the March Commission meeting, is the Schuler-Heim Bridge down in Los Angeles area, and that will be coming forward next Commission meeting. There are 2 local projects that may be coming forward, rather large local projects that may be coming forward. The first is the Presidio Parkway, or Doyle Drive, and the project delivery commissioners have been briefed a couple of times by our attorneys on where that stands. And the second project under that, the local, is the Gerald Desmond Bridge, and that's another project that has a potential for some high risk coming forward. One project that is not going to be delivered this year is the Ferguson project. It's after a significant rock slide. The unstable project site is being reevaluated to determine course of action. I've got 2 slides to show you what happened. On November 3rd, the project looked like this. We were preparing to build a rock shed for this landslide that occurred a number of years ago. This is a major thoroughfare into the Yosemite Valley. That project was going to be designed and ready to go to construction here this quarter. On November 19th, we had a massive slide on that particular project. We are going to have to go back to the drawing board on this particular project. It is not safe to work here. The contractor is on board with a CMGC contract, and so we're going to have to look at new alternatives. People are still getting Yosemite through here. We've diverted traffic a number of years ago to the other side of the river, so just make you aware of that particular project. The last project I want to share is a project that just completed in July of this summer, and it's the Route 99 Butte Creek Bridge Replacement Project. This is a real success story. This is a project that has significant environmental risk. We worked very closely with our environmental partners to come up with a plan. That plan was to replace a bridge, demo half the bridge, rebuild that half, then go to the other side, demo that half, and then rebuild it finally. We get out to construction, and the contractor proposed a change to that, a great success story. So instead of taking 2 seasons, they proposed a temporary bridge. So demo the whole project, move everything on, all the traffic onto a temporary bridge, and get the project done in 1 season. And it was a huge success in that regard. Saved us a little money, but more importantly, saved us a lot of time and reduced the cost of doing business in construction oversight out in construction. This picture shows the temporary bridge and the final bridge that was completed and open to traffic this summer. I'm available to take any questions.
Just a quick comment. You're going to have a lot more rock slides with all the fires we've had. The ground cover and vegetation has gone in so many parts of our state.
Any other comments, questions? Thank you. Item 55, Stephen.
Yes, Commissioners. Item 55 is the Proposition 1B Quarterly Report. On this report, staff has requested that the Department concentrate on the intercity rail program. The Intercity Rail program has 17 projects. 2 of the projects continue to struggle. They have not been allocated yet. One of the projects is project number 3, which is the Northern California Maintenance Facility. And then project number 5, the Coast Daylight Track and Signal. Also, there are some things that are happening with project number 1, which is the procurement of locomotives and rail cars. The rail car shells were tested recently and welds failed. That contract has been put in a phase-down situation until the weld problems are re-examined, but there's no timeline given as to when that will happen. And Bruce Roberts, the Division Chief for Rail, is here to give the full report.
Commissioners, it's a pleasure to speak with you today, and it's a pleasure to be able to talk about this program. This is one of the Prop 1B elements funded through the PTMISEA. It's a small program, about $400 million, but it's a program that has actually accomplished quite a bit with that $400 million. It has allowed us to leverage and be a state match for federal grants to achieve federal funds that allow the state to purchase 20 new locomotives, up to 42, maybe more, rail cars. We have a series of projects that have increased and improved capacity on the existing corridors. These are the corridors of the Capital Corridor, the San Joaquin Corridor, and the Los San Corridor. And we're also undertaking a number of things with new platforms, sidings. We have replaced a bridge, needed bridge in San Diego using this fund to help leverage. Grade cross improvements through counties that are not self-help and able to in order to improve safety issues along there. And along with, we intend to, with our unallocated projects or projects still underway, to undertake improvements at our facilities and also additionally with other rail improvements. So to date, looking at the program as a whole, this is a pie looking at the $400 million of the program. We have allocated 78% of the projects. So as a percentage, when you say 22% is unallocated, it comes across as a big percentage for a 10-year-old program. But we want to talk about what that unallocated projects are and what we're doing to actively manage and build the right projects. Another just a little pie demonstration of talking about the 17 projects that are in the program itself, of what we have completed, what's underway, and again, what is unallocated or still yet to be done. A representation or a listing of the types of projects and how we have balanced and put projects across the corridors, across the state, and also leveraged additional funds. The money that has gone into the first one, specifically the rail and locomotive. Last year you did an allocation of about $108 million for equipment. We have then executed a contract with Siemens to purchase 14 additional locomotives, bringing California jobs, Tier 4 locomotives that will be delivered. And when we talk about our spending plan for this project, while it's taken a long time to get to a point to spend our money, we will expend about $100 million in 1 year in 2018 when the 14 locomotives are delivered. The time it's taken, unfortunately, to get to these, and Commissioner Burke can understand this, we are complying with the NGEC specs. These are new specs, a national standard for both Amtrak, for the intercity services, and the time to reestablish a rail manufacturing capacity within the country has been much slower. It's been a steeper hill than any of us expected. While we use these funds to meet our federal grants and to apply for the federal grants in 2010, notice to proceed in about 2012 with the vendor, we won't see our first cars until 2018. It's a 6-year process to develop, to take those specs from a specification to approved design and actually finally to get that delivery done. But with that, we will have vehicles that are safe. They will stand up to, so they have crash energy management within them. They'll be able to safely meet speeds of up to 125 miles an hour on traditional rail lines, and also to be able to be environmentally and energy efficient. Additional other projects in there just list where we've done a number of projects across the state. These are our unallocated jobs that exist and probably the focus of why we're coming back to talk about what we're actively doing to address the remaining funds of the program. I do show one unallocated project in here of $30 million. I would with good fortune and a willing commission, when you take up item number 70, you will actually allocate a third of this, so that amount will be reduced by $30 million when you take on the platform at Van Nuys today. But as of today, we have 84, or after the end of today, it might be about $50 million of this program remain unallocated. We are actively looking at what it takes to partner with and utilize these funds in a way that it's the right project. We talked about the issues that have taken place when this program. In hindsight, we can always look back and say, what can we do? Could have we done better with bond programs? This program didn't have a time factor in it, such as like the TCIF project did, where it said all projects will be allocated by a set date. We strive for a geographic balance across the state and to put them across the corridors. Some of that geographic balance has taken longer than we would have expected or would have liked it to take and to get the money allocated. We've also then have utilized, and these funds have been able to then bring forward and help with, and I'll use a project example, such as the Santa Margarita Bridge. It leveraged TCRP money to finish that project, so that, as we know, some of these programs go for quite a while. The TCRP money that of the early 2000s, we were able to put money additionally within Sandag so they could build that bridge and finish that. But what we are doing is we have worked to leverage the funds. We have worked to then bring the upgrades, and we're actively working to improve our rail system. So the point of our presenting today was really to talk about, we do have some funds that are unallocated, but we're actively looking at how to spend them and use those funds, propose a partnership with projects, looking at agencies such as, could we leverage them with the TCR, the Transit Intercity Grant programs? Could it be potentially, could we have applicants come in and say we could actually utilize on this corridor as a leveraged approach, they can utilize the greenhouse gas funds along with it. And we will continue to actively work to show that we have a funding plan to get the rest of the money allocated underway, and then it's spent on, not just spent quickly, but primarily spent on the right projects that give us good benefits. Thank you. Is there any questions or?
Jim and then Franny.
On these unallocated projects, can you provide us with the schedule as when these things are going to come forward?
A schedule to come forward of the 4 projects. One of them you will take.
One I know about, but I'm talking about the other 3.
The other 2, the Raymer Bernstein is leveraging STIP dollars, and unfortunately, it is a project within the current STIP that is being moved out. So it's impacted by it's leveraging. It's impacted by the STIP estimate and the fund estimate of when and where that project lands within possible allocation dates. The department is asking for that project to be moved out to at least 17, 18. It might be moved out farther to leverage with the STIP dollars. The other 2 projects, the Coast Daylight does not have a full funding plan in place right now. That was more of the geographic balance that was trying to achieve across the state and potentially be available to leverage federal funds that might come along. That one does not have a delivery date scheduled at this point. And finally, on Northern California Maintenance, actively underway with our design work, working with the San Joaquin JPA, and looking to allocate and to put that money to work next fiscal year prior to new equipment arriving.
And what about the rail cars where the wells failed?
The rail cars, that is a test. That was one of the test elements of it. The rail car project continues to move along. It is in the design stage right now, and that design stage will continue throughout the rest of this year with a successful design, hopefully being presented to both the FRA and to us as the customer by summer of this year. So that would be production of about 2018 for the rail cars.
Thank you.
Commissioner Inman and Commissioner Brooke.
On the active project list where you have the procurement of the locomotives and the rail cars, yes. When you talk about expenditures of $6 million, I think maybe another column there was talk about what's obligated, because you've ordered your locomotives and you can't take delivery till 2018. We still have that commitment. I mean, we're under contract, I assume. So
Yes.
it's just that you don't have them, so you haven't paid the total price. So I think the 22% complete maybe is not exactly totally giving the complete picture, but I think the real message there is how long it takes to get the Tier 4s. And I think that's a huge challenge for all of us. And we've heard over and over from our rail partners, especially on the freight side, they're frankly we can't get them if we want them. So I think that is something that's important for all of us. And then I guess where I have a question, so that was a statement, but the question is, we talked about the TCIF and had some deadlines, and whenever we have an arbitrary deadline, it causes us to wiggle different ways. But we picked up and got the work done really quicker. So in terms of lessons learned here, would we have been better to have some deadlines into this?
I think looking back and having been involved with a number of bond programs, I think the deadlines are good for all parties to focus to that point. I think, and I use that. I think the TCF for that deadline, having been involved personally with the Hatchery project and also the others, it focuses all parties to coalesce toward a common goal. And the expectation for the bond, as we hear and we're well aware of, it is voted and approved by the public to be expended on projects and to see real results, and so to put that money to work.
Yes, Commissioners, this is the actual lesson learned out of this is if you have deadlines, things get done. If you don't have deadlines, things just skid along.
Commissioner Burke?
Oh, I just want to understand, on the Van Nuys, it's $10 billion left. I see the $30 billion there. Somehow I thought that part of it was already expended.
We actually, as this is a unique program that allows the funding to actually go toward support, and so it is locally delivered, and so we as a funding entity have provided money to SCRA and to LA Metro to develop the design. So it was a partial allocation, which is what we're showing. So it's a unique program. There's no easy way to show. We've actually funded money for the design to LA Metro to develop designs for Van Nuys and Raymer to Burnson, and then we will be funding the actual construction with your.
That's the $30 million.
That's the $30 million.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Item 56, Laurel.
Yes, Commissioners, this is an information item. As you recall, you approved STIP allocation priorities at the December meeting. So what I'm bringing forward at this meeting for your information is a list of the projects remaining for allocation, basically put into those priority categories. And I wanted to just bring this forward to show people what I plan to do as I recommend allocations as we move forward. And so it's an information item. I wanted to make sure that the region saw it and that you saw it. This is what I'll use to make recommendations as we move forward.
Questions? Item 57.
Yes, Commissioners, item 57, this is an action item. This is the STIP delivered list. As you recall, there were allocation requests last time that were not approved. They were instead placed on the delivered list. So this will be coming back at probably every meeting as an action item. This is an action item because based on these priorities that were approved and this list that I've developed, I would like to recommend making some allocations off of this list. So I want to recommend 3 of the 5, and the 3 that I recommend allocations are the North Main Street Sidewalk and Safety Project in Mono County for $90,000. The North Civic Center Drive Improvements Project in Marin County for $407,000, and the Capitalized Maintenance Capital Corridor Project, $1 million. Those 3 projects are recommended for allocation at this time. The other 2 projects in Solano County are not at this time recommended. They will remain on the list to be allocated when the funds are available.
Motion by Commissioner Simi.
Second.
And second by Commissioner Maydoffer. Any questions? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Item 58, Stephen.
Yes, Commissioners. Item 58 are shop amendments. Staff recommends that you approve the amendments.
Move approval. Second. Motion by Commissioner Arp, second by Commissioner Gardino. Any questions? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Item 59, Stephen.
Yes, Commissioners. The next items are supplemental allocations. Item 59 is a supplemental allocation to award a construction contract. This is a shop binder A project that rehabilitates pavement. There were 3 bids on this project. The low bid is $285,000 over the allocation amount. When the bids were examined, it turned out that there was a new specification for placing full-depth replacement cement that required multi-layers and multi-steps, whereas the old method only required 1 step. The department's estimators on the quantities estimated that there'd be more cost to this, but unfortunately when the bid item came up, it was still 52% over what the estimators estimated. But the real issue was here, the estimators forgot that once you're doing multi-steps, that it takes more time. So they blew it on the number of days that you'd have full closures, and that item came in at 321% over. Unfortunately, that's a mistake. If you rebid this project, you're not going to get any lower bids, so staff would be recommending that you allocate this supplemental allocation for $285,000.
Made the motion? Madafford made the motion. Second was Assimi. Any questions? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Item 60, Stephen.
Yes, Commissioners. Item 60 is also a supplemental allocation to award a construction contract. This is a shop project that was allocated for $2.8 million. On November 5th of 2015, 3 bids were received, and the low bid is $1.3 million, or 45% over the engineer's estimate. The department is recommending that you allocate these funds to let the project proceed. They believe that the bids are okay because there are 3 bidders that are within 15% of each other. But the department's book item is kind of schizophrenic because it also indicates that the engineer's estimate was correct. It also indicates that there was another project, a similar project, that this project is building 20 on and off ramps in 20 locations, and there was a similar project that bids were opened a month before that has 18 locations, and that one was under the engineer's estimate. Looking at these things, staff believes that probably you should not allocate this request and request that the department rebid this project and see what the market has to say on it. So staff's recommendation is for you not to allocate.
Staff recommendation.
Motion by Commissioner Gilmetti, second by Commissioner Madoff or Commissioner Inman. Any question?
Did the bidder who was awarded the contract the month before, was he one of the 3 bidders and he's figured something new out, or what's that?
He's one of the bidders. He was actually the low bidder on the October contract, and he's the very highest bidder on the November contract.
And what's up with that?
We have the district director who could help address some of that.
Bijan, let's look at those bids.
Good morning, Commissioners. Bijan Satibi, District Director for Bay Area. The bid actually failed to reflect the market. If you look at the 3 bids, the first low bidder and the second low bid are 0.3% apart. And the third low bidder is 15% from the other 2. So I think the market actually is setting this. We have a number of items that has contributed to the cost increase for this, for the bids. I think the fact that the locations of the project is in 20 locations, 20 ramp locations. The production for those locations are low, has contributed to the cost of the individual items to actually be higher. The method that was used to estimate, the approach was correct, but as I mentioned, I think it still failed to reflect the market value for the project. We used some of the bids that came in on other projects for this. We had one item that we had not used in the district, Before, we used the bid items from other districts. There were 2 other projects in District 1 and 6. We used those and the bid for that item, which has a bonding varying course on the asphalt that we had never used to extend the life of the asphalt. That item actually came in substantially higher than what we bid. We don't think going back to the market is going to get us a better value for this. I think that the estimate failed to reflect the market, although the approach to developing the estimate was prudent, but it did not reflect the market. The production, because of the amount of, because of the quantity of the material and the production for the locations, the 20 location, makes a difference in the bid, and that was not reflected in the engineer's estimate.
Well, but you had 18. The winning contractor just was doing 18, and those are so different from this batch of 20 that the world changed?
This is in an urban area. This is 580, as you're familiar, within Oakland. The amount of lane closures they have to do on these locations is different. Again, the material that we use in this project is different from what we use in the other project. This material on the asphalt, which is one of the contributing items on the increase, is one that we had not used in District 4 before. This is the first time we're using that. It has a bonded varying course on the asphalt. That is one item that we had estimated at about $140 a ton. It came in at $385, so it's substantially higher. It is in line, our estimate was in line with the bids in other districts, but we don't have any historical data within our district of this material, and also the urbanized location of the project and the number of ramps, the number of location contributing to less production for the contractor, and also the quantities were less. So I think those are the contributing factor to the higher bid. Talking to the contractors and talking to staff looking at this, we do not see that we could, first of all, we shouldn't be advertising the same project when we've already advertised it once, told the contractor we want to do this. I don't think it's fair to the contractors who actually put a bid in. The bid is not a single bid. We have 3 bids, so competition is in place. First and second is 0.3% apart. $11,000 on a $4 million job is what the difference is. And I think when we put out a bid, although the engineer's estimate isn't right, I think we need to tell the market that we mean it when we put the project out, so that the contractors continue to be active and bidding on our projects. Otherwise, costs of other projects are going to go higher.
Commissioner Gimeni.
Bijan, you mentioned that this is the first time you spec this asphalt?
Yes.
Why can't we spec something we're more familiar with, and maybe the price will come down? I mean, you got an increase here of $500,000. That's $500,000, almost half of the total increase that you're asking for.
This is an asphalt that we didn't use in our district, but it's been used by the department in other places. This is in order not to have to come back as often to this location. It extends the life of the pavement, so we decided to use that in an urbanized area.
All rubberized asphalt extends the life of the pavement. Why don't we use something that we're more familiar with?
Well, no, it's not the rubberized asphalt. I think it's the bonding material that actually is the portion that we had not used. We use rubberized asphalt all over the district, in the warmer part of the district, actually. We use quite a bit of rubberized asphalt. So it's not the rubber that it causes the increase. It is the material that bonds it together that extends the life of it even further.
But you've used other types of rubberized asphalt in your district before. Now you're speccing something you've never used before. Why don't we go back and spec the one you've used before to see what happens to the asphalt price?
I think the intent of using that was to, again, this is an urbanized area that we're trying to avoid to keep coming back and extend the life of that pavement on those ramps. So that was the intent of using that material.
I understand what you're trying to tell me, but I've also said we've used other rubberized asphalt in your district, and it's doing fine. I mean, you've got it all over 580 now.
Well, again, the life of
everyone
this
wants
material
a
is just
Maserati,
longer.
but maybe we can only afford a Chevy here.
And I'd like to also point out that the other project that was bid opened in October that had 18 locations is also in an urban area.
A different product?
It seems to be that the difference between the October project and the November project is a difference in the product.
Go out to bid and change the specs and see what happens.
That would be one item. That would be one of the contributing items to cost increase.
I understand that, but it's almost 50% of the total increase that you're asking for.
Just to be sure, there is cost involved in rebidding, repackaging the document, and going out. So part of that saving, if it is there, would be actually eliminated by that cost.
Always an excuse.
Any other questions? There's a motion on the floor. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Item 61.
Yes, Commissioners. Item 61 is a supplemental allocation to complete construction. This project is on State Route 12 on Baldwin Island in San Joaquin County. It was allocated for $32.6 million. The department needs $5.5 million to install lightweight cellular concrete in an area close to the Maculumni River Bridge. When the project was being developed, geotechnical studies were done, and it indicated that there's saturated peat material along this route. The construction strategy was to dewater the underlying material using wick drains and place 5 feet of earthen surcharge prior to construction of the structural section. Once the construction happened in that area close to the Maculumni River Bridge, excessive settlement started happening. In order to fix the problem, the department needs to redo that area using lightweight concrete so they do not impact the schedule of a project and do not impact the traveling public. Staff recommends that you approve the supplemental allocation.
Motion by Mayhofer, second by Gilmetti. Any questions? And Mayhofer and Semi. Jim made the motion. Any other questions? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I have it. 62.
Yes, Commissioners. Item 62 is a supplemental allocation to close out a construction contract. The department needs an additional $0.49 million to settle a differing site condition claim. When this project was put out to bid, there was contaminated soil that everybody thought was just in the median of the project. It turned out once the contractors are working that there is contaminated soil on the shoulders too, and the contractor needed to haul that soil off, and the claim came in at the $0.49 million. Staff recommends that you approve this supplemental allocation.
Motion by Commissioner Inman, second by Commissioner Semi. Any questions? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Item 63, Stephen.
Yes, Commissioners. Item 63 is also a supplemental to close out a construction contract. The department needs an additional $1.8 million to settle construction claims and pay a stormwater discharge fine. During constructions, there were very heavy rains from November 16 to December 21st, 2012. Over 14 inches of rain fell, and that caused excessive discharges that the water board fined the department and the contractor. The contractor also had to do extra work to try to contain this problem, but unfortunately it kept on happening and the fines kept on happening. One of this is just things happen sometimes. So staff would be recommending that you approve this $1.8 million supplemental allocation.
Question. Stephen, what does the Department of Water Resources do with the money, the fine money?
It's actually Water Control Board,
Water
I believe.
Control Board.
What do they do with their money?
Yeah. What do they do with the fine money that they charge this other department?
That I don't know, but I would imagine goes into their budget and hires more inspectors to levy more fines.
Third line, Commissioner Art.
Can we at least send a communication to them and ask them to give us an outline of how they handle that
Yes,
money? We'd like to know where it goes.
When we had our delivery committee meeting, that request was made, and the department is going to be investigating what happens with the money.
Wow, they have to really investigate it, huh? Okay, thanks.
Commissioner Hammond.
Well, I think along those lines, we're all trying to do our best to respond to the drought commissions, and then we get some rain and stuff. I mean, it's really hard for a sister agency to be so stern. I think if it was malicious, that'd be one thing, but it's an act of God when we have this big rain, and a lot of us have been doing rain dances in the South hoping we'd have it. So it's hard with, we're poor, and I think, can we negotiate with them?
No, there was some negotiations, but the fines came in at what the fines came in, and they have to be paid.
What happens if we deny this? What happens if we deny this request?
What happens if you deny this request? I would imagine you should be open to a lawsuit.
Okay, that's great. I move that we deny the request.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Madaffer.
Comment, please.
Second by Commissioner Assimi. And on the question.
On the question, it's always frustrating when one government agency finds another government agency, but the fact is, I'm assuming, if we're being fined, then, although not intentional, Caltrans was in the wrong and violated some regulation. Jim, you and I went through this, the City of San Diego and Clean Water. It's great to have a little temperamental moment here at the board, but we should pay this fine in good faith. We're a government agency, they're a government agency. Let's try to get it fixed up and move on. So I would oppose the motion.
Okay, well, we've got a motion on the floor. Any other questions?
Yes, I won't be supporting that motion, but people are pretty well aware that this is an issue I think needs to get, we need a clear understanding. This was a very unusually heavy rainstorm. It just seems to me that there ought to be some rational guidelines so that if everybody, the contractor and Caltrans are doing their best to comply with these things, then you have an unusually heavy storm come through that really exceeds what everybody expects, but they still get fined for it. Just seems to me there ought to be some kinds of criteria put in place that on extraordinary circumstances it ought to be revisited. The bottom line person that pays for this is the taxpayer. We end up paying more for projects, and so that's really why I want to get the information. I want to see what we can do down the road to try to fix this kind of problem.
And staff is more than willing to pursue getting the information that you have requested.
Jim?
Mr. Chairman, perhaps a better motion. I totally concur with Ms. Kehoe's comments. At the same time, I think that's what my frustration is saying. Maybe the contractor could have done better, and there's issues there, and maybe it should be their responsibility and not the taxpayers. I don't know if we have all the facts to truly make a decision. I'm wondering what would be the harm if this particular item were delayed until the next commission meeting, because Senator Kehoe is absolutely right. We have to pay fines if they are in order. But do we have all the facts here in this matter that means that the state taxpayers should be paying this thing? Was there warnings? Do we have, as Commissioner Art pointed out, some possibilities in the case of El Nino and extraordinary issues? I mean, to me, I consider some of these things an act of God, and perhaps insurance should have been looked at. I don't know if we have enough facts.
Well, just to let you know, Commissioners, majority of the fine has already been paid. There's only a small piece that needs to be paid. Majority of the $1.8 million to settle claims with the contractor for extra work that he had to do. The original claims were much, much higher. So if we delay all of this, we would be in violation of whatever claim settlement we have will start incurring. interest penalties and all kinds of other stuff.
All right, well, I'll withdraw my motion, but I would think that perhaps something that CTC staff could place on a future commission agenda, and perhaps with a report from Caltrans as well, is to get a better understanding as to how these types of cost overruns can be mitigated, again, to protect the taxpayers. So I'll withdraw my motion. I'll let somebody else make a motion.
Okay. Wait a minute. Will the seconder agree to the withdrawal of the motion?
Oh, I don't think you need a second to withdraw a motion, do you?
Well, he has to agree to it.
Oh.
You agree?
I accept withdrawal the second.
Okay.
I got it.
Now we're open for a motion.
I make that motion.
Motion by... Right. Motion by Commissioner Arp, second by Commissioner Gardino. We have a speaker on the issue, Darren Grassi from the Tuolumne County Transportation Council.
Thank you, Commission. I just want to express our concerns in agreement with Commissioner Simi and Gilmetti about the water fines, but the discussion was not bringing out that the water fines have been paid, and at this point we're looking at the settlement agreement with the contractor. There is a timeline on that, and we were concerned about exposure to potentially additional costs. So we're in agreement with the current motion.
Any other questions or comments?
One other, Stephen, can we get for the next hearing what happens to the fine dollars?
As soon as we find out what the information is, we will transmit it onto the delivery committee and onto the commission. I can't say it'll be ready by the next commission meeting, but we will be trying.
All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Item 64.
Yes, Commissioners. Item 64 is an allocation of $2.6 million for 4 minor projects. Staff recommends approval.
Motion by Commissioner Gilmetti, second by Commissioner Simi. Any questions? All in favor, please say aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Item 65.
Item 65, Commissioners, is our shop allocations. Staff recommends that you approve the allocations.
Second. Semi made the motion, I made the second.
All right, Commissioner, did you get that, Douglas? Any questions? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Item 66.
Yes, Commissioners, this is an action item. This is a request for $175,000 for STIP project in Mono County. Consistent with the approved allocation priorities, staff recommends that you place this request on the delivered list for allocation at a later meeting.
Simi made the motion. Burke is the second. Any questions? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Item 67, Laura.
Yes, Commissioners, again, this is an action item, STIP allocation request. It's a little more complicated. There are 8 projects on this item, and staff will recommend allocation for 6 of those, and for 2 of them will recommend place on the delivered list. So the 6 that I want to recommend allocation for, these are on pages 1 and 2 of the attachments. Project number 2, Mount Shasta Boulevard Guardrail Project in Siskiyou County for $22,000 is recommended for allocation. Project number 4, Jewett Creek Bridge at Kirkwood Road in Tehama County for $21,000. Staff recommends approval. Project number 5, Jewett Creek Bridge at Columbia Avenue in Tehama County for $15,000. Recommend approval. Project number 6, City of Tehama 5th Street and Guile Road reconstruction and drainage improvement in Tehama County for $1,083,000. Recommend approval. Project number 7, Miller Creek Class 2 bike lanes and pedestrian improvements in Marin County for $362,000 is recommended for approval. And on page 3 of the attachment, the PPM in Lassen County for $100,000 is recommended for approval. Then there are 2 projects, that's projects number 1 and 3 on page 1 of the attachment, that are recommended to be placed on the delivered list.
Commissioner Simi with the motion, Gilmetti with the second. Any questions? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Item 68.
Yes, Commissioners, this is an action item. This is 3 requests for border infrastructure program allocations for projects in San Diego County, totaling a little over $26 million. Staff recommends your approval of these allocations.
Medhoffer with the first, Inman with the second. Any questions? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Item 69.
Yes, Commissioners, under item 69, this is a request for STIP allocation, including some Prop 1B STIP for a project in Santa Barbara County. Consistent with the approved allocation priority, staff recommends your approval of this allocation.
Arp was first. Assimi? Madava was the first. Who was the second? Assimi was the second. Any questions? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. It's really awkward from this angle. Item 70.
Yes, Commissioners, this is again is an action item, a request for allocation of the Prop 1B PTMISEA funds. This is the project that Bruce Roberts mentioned earlier, the Van Nuys North Platform Project in Los Angeles County. Staff recommends your approval of this allocation.
Second. Burke with the motion, Gardino with the second. Any questions? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Item 71, Laurel.
Yes, Commissioners, again, an action item. This is a request for allocation of Transit and Intercity Rail Capital Program funds. These are the cap and trade funds for $713,000 for a project in San Diego County. Staff recommends your approval of this allocation.
Madapa with the motion, Assimi with the second. Any questions? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Item 72, Laurie.
Commissioners, item 72 is for financial allocations for 2014 ATP projects. This item is to allocate $8.9 million of ATP funds to 20 projects. Staff recommends your approval.
Assimi, motion. Burke with the second. Any questions? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Item 73, Laurie.
Item 73 is an action item to advance $120,000 in ATP funds programmed in 16-17. We have identified sufficient savings in 15-16 to cover this small advance. However, other advances will likely not be recommended for ATP projects until the May and June Commission meetings. Staff recommends your approval of this advance.
See me with the motion. Hopper with the second. Any questions? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Item 74.
Commissioners, items 74 through 78 are time extensions. You should have a yellow spreadsheet for the time extensions. There is one revision that is not reflected on that spreadsheet that you should have as a pink item. The City of Imperial Beach is now requesting a 12-month time extension for a contract award for the Elm Avenue Traffic, Pedestrian, and Cycling Safety and Mobility Improvement Project. Staff recommends your approval of these time extensions as listed on the yellow spreadsheet with the one revision just noted.
Second. I don't know which one of them.
See me with the motion, Arp with the second. Any questions? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. I think they're mumbling on purpose. Okay, now they're just messing with us.
We're just messing with you now.
Yeah. All right. Is there any public comments? If not, then we'll stand adjourned. Thank you.